close enough and I talk loud enough. That's my favorite new band I've discovered. But this is the book we were talking about. Yes, here we go. This is Wesley. This is Signum on Twitch. And we left off last time talking about Hull House. I don't think I remember to put a hyphen in it in my description today. I couldn't remember if there was a hyphen or not. Hull House, like it's a house that is somehow so connected to its name that it gets that compound factor of the hyphen. A little bit like a boarding school. That's what she does with boarding school too. Maybe that's just a convention from her time or a personal thing that she's doing. That's Jane Addams, of course, is the she in question, the author of Hull House. 20 years at Hull House, her book about it, and the place itself, uh, her settlement house that is a kind of community center and provider of social services um, before the government and nonprofits were really a big thing in that space. This is our final book that we'll be discussing for a little while here, and I'm curious if anyone out there might have been reading it along with us. I can see on my various screens, but I'm not very good at keeping track. But if you want to say something about this book, you go ahead and put it in the chat on Twitch, and I think I might even see it. I've got that screen open there. Anyways, um, why is this our last book for a little while? Well, it's one that I found really interesting. I just don't know if other people out there are as taken with it. The history behind some of our assumptions about education is what I was going for with this one, and I think some of the ways that that connects with play are pretty interesting. Tried to talk about that a bit last time, but I just I just think we might have better luck on Twitch. Now, I know this might sound outlandish, but we might have better luck on Twitch if we talk more about video games and less about books, just for a little while, just to re-engage some of our viewers and listeners for the next, oh, I don't know, month or two. We'll try it for a month or two and see how it goes. Um, I'm also open to the possibility that, I'm just not the person to do this sort of thing on Twitch, that maybe reading books on Twitch is really someone's cup of tea, but I just haven't found a way to connect with them. And so, I'll play some video games next time. We'll probably take a little break actually for December. Um, so let's call it this is our penultimate discussion on books on Twitch. How's that? Meaning that we'll talk about this book a little bit more today, and then we will go into video games and not so much books for next time. Okay, good. So we've decided. Um, if anyone out there had questions that you'd like to focus on, I'm open to hearing them. Otherwise, I think I'll just kind of click through and look at some of the highlights of Jane Addams' writing. Um, so Jane Addams, of course, the product of a time in American history when education is not widely available to women, but she excels in her own education. And as part of that education, she experiences this grand tour of Europe and especially of England, where she gets the idea for starting what becomes Hull House in Chicago. Um, Now, she does this with a friend of hers, and she has the support and backing of her family, her teachers, her network, if you want to call it that. But she is herself pretty remarkable, I think. Again, a product of her time, but really transcending her time in the way that some of the other figures we've looked at do. Figures like Frederick Douglass, like William James, these American thinkers, writers, people who have really interesting lives as well. Um, to just briefly rehash where we've been here, William James, a great psychologist and philosopher whose insights at least partly have to do with his own religious and psychological uh, debates within himself, issues that he had. Um, and Frederick Douglass, born into slavery, escapes with the aid of his clandestine study of reading and literacy, gaining that ability despite all odds, and partly due to its influence, he gets inspired to gain his freedom, and he actually enacts his escape um, by forging some documents. And he tells the story a few different ways in his different books, but we looked at just the shortest version of that story. That brings us then to Jane Addams, who is somewhat closer to the present in that she's around the turn of the 20th century, 19th century to the 20th century, that is. Um, and again, overcoming some um, major obstacles, right? In her case, having to do with the expectations set for her as a woman. So I think these are all inspirational figures, all people I certainly look up to personally. Um, and in terms of the writing, um, she is really compiling a lot of her essays here and adding a certain amount of autobiographical information and connection points to tell a coherent story of how she's able to do this amazing thing, creating a place for people who need help. That is, because of the way that industry and the city treat people at that time. Oh, my ad block has been updated. That's lovely. Thank you, ad block. Um, I'm not sure why that happened. Uh, so when she talks about her great admiration for a figure like Lincoln, um, she refers here to also, I think I might have gone past already the Crito, the Crito being one of Plato's dialogues. Um, she, of course, is modest here and says the Greek was too hard for her, but she appeals to a then relatively new translation of Jowett. Um, so I think this this is a good place to just drop in there that of all the dialogues she could have mentioned, the Crito I find a pretty interesting one. Um, it is an attempt to break Socrates out of jail. Socrates, the great philosopher who Plato's dialogues tend to be about. He's at this point been convicted and sentenced to death. He's in jail, imprisoned. I don't know what jail looks like at that time, but anyway, he's under arrest. He's not supposed to leave, and his friends come to him one last time to try to break him out and try to set him free, get him to go into exile instead. They seem to think that this is um, what would be best, right? Is if he doesn't die. And Socrates does not take them up on it. He refuses to leave because it would go against the laws of his city. So this is a curious case where one might be tempted to call Socrates a bit stubborn. Um, he does not engage in what we might recognize as a form of civil disobedience, um, or rather, he is so obedient to the laws of his society that he doesn't break them even non-violently. So it's a curious, tricky case. It's an interesting one for her to raise here, given that she will come under uh, some suspicion later on as she's developing um, her society. Um, She will get involved in politics to an extent on behalf of the different societies and boards of which she's a part. Um, and she will say that that is one of the tougher experiences that she has. Um, but of course, she herself is, by and large, I can't remember a time when she mentions breaking any laws. She's working within the system, but working to change its effects on the most needy people. So anyway, an interesting kind of pair of heroes there, the translator and the philosopher um, in that book. Um, all right. So discussing the kinds of ideas she comes out of school with, feeling very stifled here after she graduates and going on her journeys, but feeling a sort of at a loose end. There's the word for it, the Weltschmerz. I don't know about my pronunciation, but it kind of uh, lassitude, a feeling that she should be doing more. The character that I think of here, oh gosh, what's her name? The character in Middlemarch, Dorothea. Dorothea. I think she compares herself to Don Quixote, maybe, or is it Saint Teresa? Maybe it's the narrator who compares her to Saint Teresa. These amazing figures, these people with such talent, such ability, and yet sort of oppressed, stifled at the very least by their society, unable to put some of those um, talents to use. There we go. But of course, she is moving in the right direction here, um, coming to a kind of uh, decision point, and again, finding a model for what she wants to do in London, in England at that time. I think that's actually mentioned here. All right. Um, oh, some positivists she files in line with. Um, okay. This is very Dorothea too. Her smug notebook this is the bottom of page 53 here. Her smug notebook states that all this was an admission that the saints but embodied fine action, and it proceeds at some length to set forth my hope for a cathedral of humanity which should be capacious enough to house a fellowship of common purpose. There should be beautiful enough to persuade men to hold fast to the vision of human solidarity. So she's looking back and feeling a certain, uh, what is it? Uh, Superiority in hindsight as she looks at her positivist, that is materialistic uh, thoughts when she was younger, and and still this is a seed for her ideas and where they will go. So again, that is Toynbee Hall and the People's Palace. There we go. In 1888, years after her first visit to East London, she finds herself at Toynbee Hall, equipped not only with a letter of introduction, but with high expectations and a certain belief that whatever perplexities and discouragement concerning the life of the poor were in store for me, I should at least know something at first hand, have the solace of daily activity. So there we go. So she's making her bid for activity, if not full out saintdom, sainthood, sanctification. I think that has a different meaning. Anyways, she wants to do something for the poor. And again, I may be pronouncing Toynbee Hall wrong, but anyway, this is a model for her to bring back to Chicago. And she does, and she establishes it, and it's a huge challenge, but she makes it happen. All right, so this book includes some sketches, which are pretty cool to get a flavor for the time. Um, Later on in the book, I'm trying to flip through here to find it. Uh, so here she is making her case, persuading um, people of the value of her projects, some of her early undertakings, setting up the kitchen, setting up the school, the kindergarten. Um, all this is astonishing. The kind of things that she does, it just makes you feel like, I'm a teacher. I work in schools, but am I really making a difference the way I might? Here it is again, the Cathedral of Humanity. Um, so she does not lose sight of those early ideals, even as she's making a little fun of herself. And I think that's a good attitude to have. All right. Poverty she digs into here. I'm flipping through to try to find a point in this book where she meets the writer Tolstoy. Tolstoy, of course, the great author of Russian novels. Um, but the encounter with him is so interesting. Maybe if I just search for his name, because I obviously don't remember at what point this happens. Let's see how good of a search we can get here. There we go. If I click it, will it go there? Oh, did I already skip? Oh, we were just about there. Um, oh no, this is just a name dropping of Tolstoy. His indictment um, would apply to the American cities. Oh, this is quite the indictment. I feel indicted personally by this. Wherever we may live, he said, if we draw a circle around us of 100,000 or 1,000 or even of 10 miles circumference, and look at the lives of those men and women who are inside our circle, we shall find half-starved children, old people, pregnant women, sick and weak persons, working beyond their strength, who have neither food nor rest enough to support them, and who, for this reason, die before their time. So that is part of her inspiration as well. All right. And then Tolstoy himself, 172. Can it load? Oh, yeah, the chapter's called Tolstoyism. So she's read the books of Tolstoy. She goes to visit Tolstoy. Um, and what happens when she meets Tolstoy? So this is another book that we might want to look at. The Yasnaya Polyana is the name of Tolstoy's uh, school that he sets up for the poor, for the people. And Tolstoy has a book called Yasnaya Polyana, where he writes his thinking about education. It's super interesting. Sorry, I've got some cat here. Um, that would be one we could look at. But again, we're not going to look at more books for a little while. Um, Tolstoy, I bring this up just to, as much as I look up to these figures, this is a case where Jane Addams looks up to Tolstoy. She goes to meet him and is really, I don't think disappointed, but maybe just he's not as impressive. He's a little bit close-minded. He's just a human being after all. And I think that's an important reminder here. As we read these great books, we can no longer go and meet these people and talk to them in reading their books though and bringing their thoughts to life again. We can't lose sight of the humanity, the frailty of these people. I think that we too often kind of deify our great writers, our great activists. This idea of the saint is not that far off. But anyhow, where was it here? Um, Here we go. The conversation at dinner and afterward, although conducted with animation and sincerity for the moment, stirred vague misgivings within me. Was Tolstoy more logical than life warrants? Could the wrongs of life he reduced to the terms of unrequited labor and all be made right if each person performed the amount necessary to satisfy his own wants? So is he oversimplifying things? Is he too logical? Is he lacking in some nuance in his arguments? Yeah, I think he is. If you look at his nonfiction, it's not as good as his fiction. The humanity, the greatness of his characters is not necessarily there in Tolstoy himself. When you look closely, when you talk to him, when you try to pin him down on some of this stuff, um, or maybe he's got it right, and it's us who are off. Anyway, what we're doing for next time. Uh, I listed the game again on Twitch because you got to put a game. I've listed it as Earthbound, but I think we've got to move forward in time a bit. And the game I want to talk about next time is Super Mario RPG. We're about out of time for today, so we won't get to it now. We didn't look at the last 100 or so pages of this book either, but after all, these books are eternal. I mean, they're out there for anyone who might be interested in it. So please keep reading. If you're out there, if you have thoughts on these, always feel free to drop in the chat, anything at all. Um, yeah, I'm really thinking this might be the second to last meeting for a while though, since I just haven't found a way to really get a lot of engagement here on Twitch. I think I might be doing it wrong. But anyway, we'll talk about Super Mario Brothers RPG. That's the original game and the re-release that they just made by all accounts, beautiful remake for the Switch, which I'm going to try to pick up here as a kind of an early Christmas present for people in my household. And of course, I'll get to play it too. Um, and I'm looking forward to talking about it with y'all. I think it makes for a great introduction to the role-playing game genre. And of course, there's all sorts of interesting ways in which the Mario platforming style game is uh, sort of leading us into this other kind of genre entirely um, of the role-playing game. So we'll check that out. We'll talk about learning and teaching with video games. Um, and I hope y'all have a good couple of weeks until that first Monday in December. We'll be back to talk at least one more time before the holiday really kicks in here. But for those of you who celebrate Thanksgiving, or if you just give thanks some other way, I hope that you have a good one. Um, all right, we'll leave it there. Thanks again. Take care.